Hey guys, welcome to book review number 95, I believe. Today we'll be reviewing Indonesia Etc. Exploring the Improbable Nation by Elizabeth PIsani. This is a great book. PIsani really kind of gets to the heart of what it means to be Indonesian, if that can even mean anything, but kind of sees all the Indonesia and its kaleidoscope aspect and all the different regions, as well as the different attitudes of people, the different motivations of people. It really is a pretty phenomenal book. Well, anyway, she does kind of a counter-clockwise journey of Indonesia, starting in what I believe is known as like the Line Islands. Should have marked some of this stuff out, but Sumba, Timor, what is that? Cebu. I should know this better. But so kind of in the early part, she visited kind of the southwest or southeast, excuse me, of Indonesia. Kind of saw some of the traditional tribes. This is a very volcanic region, though dry. Kind of a theme that she had early on that was true throughout the entire book, all the way until she got to Java, was kind of the slapdash nature of agriculture. To kind of describe Indonesia in a broad aspect, I know I started regionally, but Indonesia is really dominated economically and politically by the island of Java. In a nation of, I believe, 230 million people, I think like 160 million of them live on the island of Java, so well in the majority. And then you have the rest of the nation who really are not ethnically related to Indonesia at all, and really kind of only have cultural ties in the very immediate future, or in the very immediate past. And really, I would hypothesize that had these nations had more, or these areas had more idea of what nationhood is in sort of a modern sense, like if they had known in the early 1900s when decolonization was happening, what the modern world would look like, it is very doubtful that Indonesia would have been one country. That being said, it's not complete anarchy, and actually as I mentioned, one of the very interesting things about Indonesia is sort of the kaleidoscope aspect of it. So anyway, kind of Indonesia is a Muslim country that's split into or a Muslim country with a Christian minority. Man, I can't even think. I haven't got enough sleep. And really, the Muslims kind of dominate Java, and then kind of in the remoter regions, kind of it's split between Muslims and Christians. Particularly in the southeast, which is what I was talking about, Samba, Cebu, that kind of area, Timor. It really is Christian, this primarily being because it was largely a Portuguese colony rather than a Dutch colony. In this region, Elizabeth visits sort of the extended religious festivals that exist around the Christian calendar, in the same way that like in the southern part of the United States, they would have like 4 or 5 hour long ceremonies. It's pretty cool. She also states that kind of something that's common throughout Indonesia, even though it's not the same, it's not derived from the same root, but just kind of by happenstance is the same, is the very sort of clannish nature of Indonesia, that people very much kind of stick to their people before they have a sense of national identity, but definitely the day-to-day grind of life is not individualistic and it's not nationalistic. It's very clannish, that kind of thing. She talks about some of the craziness of ferry travel throughout Indonesia. I mean, in the southwest, she went on a ferry that she was stuck on board below just like a terrapin or tarp. These giant tarps that essentially it was like a supply vessel that sent cargo all around the islands, and then just as happenstance allowed passengers on board. Now, this would never fly in, say, like the United States, for the most part, at least not on that level where they were taking like hundreds of people on the top board, and officials turned a blind eye. But here it's just like do what you can, and battle of the fittest, evolution on the deck of some ferry in the middle of the East Indonesian Sea, or whatever the name of that sea is. Comes some other things. She talked about throughout sort of the political corruption, but kind of a theme outside of Java that exists, and I guess kind of a little bit in Sumatra too, those being the exceptions, is Indonesia, since its independence from the Dutch, which had a lot of influence on, I'll get to that later, was ruled essentially by two leaders, Sukarno and Suharto. I believe I got that right. Sukarno, the first one, being a nationalist, being a big dreamer, not being the most realistic, sort of being vaguely communist and not really that Muslim. Suharto being very nationalistic, being very anti-communist, being very militaristic, even though like the military had like, it wasn't like a completely, Indonesia in the like, what was it, like the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and through the 90s, was not strictly dominated by the military, say like a North Korea was or whatever, but there was this sort of kind of, we'll leave you alone until the military needs to come in and do something, then you better watch out, kind of thing. But what's happened since then is really democratic reforms have taken place. So now there's no longer sort of a dictator for life, but there's sort of the chaos of continual leaders, being turned over, not having a real systematic form of democracy. I mean, not that democracies should become too formalized, because then you wouldn't have democracy anymore. Kind of the rages of debate are part of the democratic system, but you don't want, sort of the anarchy that democracy untamed can sometimes create. An example being Indonesia. But as part of this democratic movement, things have become much more decentralized. So people try to claim power in their own region. Now you'd think that this would be a positive thing, that these outlying regions that for a long time have been under the yoke of Java would be able to survive. But what's really kind of happened is an exploitation of the system, where the Javanese government still sends money to the outer islands, but takes less responsibility, or I guess it was always irresponsible, but at least the means of getting that money were in cronies' hands sent from Java. So like the governor of Papua New Guinea, or Irian Guinea, would be Javanese, even though almost none of the, like less than 1% of the population in that province would be Javanese. It would just be sort of like a top-down dictation of what government and really power should be. But with this vacuum that's kind of opened up, there's really been a lot of corruption. Java's still sending in the money, but they're not really sending in their lackeys or their cronies anymore. So what you get is a lot of local politicians that are exploiting the system, and one of the ways that they're doing this in part of the decentralization program is creating more and more districts. So there's like the provincial level, which is really kind of stable. There's the national level, and there's the provincial level, which I think they're like, it's kind of roughly 12, I don't know really, but not a lot of provinces within Indonesia. But the district level has like, I think like 600 or 700 provinces or something. It was mentioned in the book, but I don't have the exact figure on me. But what's essentially happening is with these new provinces being created, there needs to be a new government house, there needs to be new road programs, there needs to be new port authorities, all coming from largely money from Java, and really not really from Java, though partially from business interests, but really from sort of mining taxes that are taken out of rich provinces that really have nothing to do with the people of those provinces, but are just sort of like international conglomerates, mining conglomerates that get a percentage, relatively small percentage, compared to how much money they're making, taken out and sent to the central government, and then the central government takes a piece for themselves but sends it back to these provinces, some of which have mining, some of which don't. In both cases, it's being exploited for the local rulers so they can rule these little fiefdoms, even though it's in the ones that do have mineral wealth, it's a tiny percentage of the wealth. And the ones that don't, well, they're still living like, little fiefdom kings. Let's see, kind of one of the interesting, let me see if I can find map E. One of the interesting kind of areas is, damn it, Flores, that was the name of the island. The Key Islands, yes, I should memorize that. I think the Key Islands are interesting because they're right off the coast of Java, or not Java, right off of Guinea, and they're almost Melanesian, almost Pacific. I mean, they really are, if you look at like bloodlines, Pacific Islander more than they are like Southeast Asian. And so you have people that have, like curly hair, very dark colored skin, but also have a very strong tradition of maritime traveling. Now, obviously, modern technology has taken on, but you got the traditional like boat races and all that stuff that kind of exists in the province. She moved up to Ternate and Tidor, though she actually didn't mention Tidor, which in another book, Ternate and Tidor were presented as rivals. But in this book, it was only Ternate that got the thing. And then there's this island called Hermanis, I believe. I'm going to call it Hermanis. It looks like a spider. That is sort of like one of the most kind of jungly areas. I guess I should mention back. I'm kind of jumping around. In Indonesia, there's numerous tribes that when there's a death in the family, the person actually lives in the household with the family until they're ready for burial. Which she has a whole story about that, and which I can't get into. I just thought it was an interesting concept of like when grandma dies, you live with her for 4 or 5 days until she's ready to be buried. Not in some funeral parlor, but in the house itself. Let's see, what else? Kind of one of the interesting stories that she mentioned was, so she lost her keys to her motorbike, and so she got the police without any identification to just say, hey, this motorbike, let's get this out of here, and so I can get it restarted and hotwired. And the police just said, yep, let's do it. And they took a motorbike out of this festival that she was at and went back. It was that sort of like a jousting festival. There were all sorts of festivals all over Indonesia. I don't think I could go into every single one of them that she went to, but obviously being a sort of cultural critic, and a genuine, not like an ironic cultural critic, but a genuine cultural critic of kind of what goes around in these very sort of, to the Western world, strange islands. Sort of the festival was kind of one of the keyholes into seeing what Indonesian life was like, particularly in a society that is very nice and very open, but sometimes kind of appeals to the audience, or particularly for Westerners, appeals to what they think Westerners would want, which is very rarely what is part of their ethnic tradition or whatever. Like they think like, oh, this Westerner wants to listen to rap music rather than listen to some sort of traditional music that we play. She went up and saw a tuna fisherman. Now in the islands that are just south of the Philippines, man, I wish this main map would have the islands on it, but they don't. I'd have to go to like individual chapters. We'll complain. But these fishermen is kind of interesting. Most of the time we think of tuna fishermen as like these, big boats where catch hundreds of tuna and kill dolphins. But actually, tuna is pretty expensive. Like you can make like $1,000 Now that's at market, not the fisherman itself after it gets through all the middlemen and really sort of the exploitative process of not telling these people how much their catch might be worth. But in these islands, fishermen caught tuna just on sort of like these small outrigger outrigger motor boats, like a few at a time, put them on ice, and then begin the process of shipping them to Japan. And actually, sort of the interesting thing here in this story is through the Indonesian kind of corruption or system of paybacks or whatever that exists throughout all business in the island. It's a little bit of a chaotic mess. People actually, this is in the far north of Indonesia, right next to the Philippines, and you could illegally run tuna via these Indonesian fishermen up to the Philippines and make a higher profit because they could get the tuna to Tokyo more directly. And so often, it's sort of weird, the gambles people are willing to take in order to make a higher profit. But it really is not, there's no fault of their own there. It's just getting around the largesse of the Indonesian system. She visited Sulawesi. I wish I had a map here. Which is kind of the Sulawesi, which is sort of the kind of spider-shaped or starfish-shaped, vaguely, island between right next to Borneo. Here, she saw teachers that wouldn't show up for work, but not in like a protesty sort of way. Just the cultural tradition was people get trained, but how things happen on a daily basis is not a set routine. I think that if I were to really go nationalistic, like describe it here, Indonesia is not Germany. Like, things don't run on a schedule well. Outside of a little bit of it in Java, but like life really is pretty slow. And actually, she said that this has kind of fallen out of favor with anthropologists. This kind of idea of, people of the tropics live slow or unorganized or whatever, whatever criticism that is. But one, there's observation, which is, it's not meant to say everybody isn't that way or there aren't ambitions even at local kind of like small levels. There's vast ambition in Indonesia. But to say that it works well is just, or the trains come in on time is just not true, or the ferries come in on time is just not true. But also Indonesians tend to describe themselves this way. They tend to be very, is it a stereotype if the people that are that largely call themselves that, I guess it is to a degree, but if the people themselves are calling themselves that, then I think that at least says something. Let's see, what else? There was the vast mining interests that she visited in Sulawesi. I'm not going to get that pronounced correctly. What it was a bitumen, so like tarmac for a road, which was largely, she thought, industrial produced, but can actually be mined or industrial produced under the right conditions. And so she just saw these mountainscapes in Sulawesi that were just like big gashes in them, to extract whatever. Okay, I gotta keep moving. Borneo, she visited, some of the tribes there, the Dayaks. Really the thing that exists in Borneo is kind of a threefold ethnic tension that exists between the Dayak, which are the sort of inland tribal people, when you see headhunters with spears and giant earlobes and canoes on fast-flowing rivers through languid jungle. That's the Dayaks. And then there's the Malays, who are the traditional, say, 500 years ago or something, business people that exist in the country. And really sort of between them are the Muradis, who the Malays imported as sort of lackeys because they felt they couldn't rely upon the Dayaks to engage in business. And so because there is this sort of decentralization effort, and particularly in Borneo, which makes up a huge geographic chunk of the country, is relatively depopulated, and really just the ability to rule from above, to have order from above, is just very difficult because there's very little infrastructure. It's very kind of tribal, if you will. A lot of the business is sort of like hit and run, or I won't say make a quick buck, but it's not established to the point where civil society would exist outside of that thing. So that all takes place, or that kind of lack of structure means that if there is ethnic tension, then it rises pretty quick to the top. And actually in '97, when the ethnic strife was going on in East Timor that eventually led to the separation of the country, there was a huge, people don't know about it, but there was a huge mass killing, as much as they do East Timor, which most people don't know about. Huge mass killing in Borneo that just wiped out, or not wiped out, it wasn't total genocide, but it was just like sort of like, for no reason, these ethnic groups just kind of one day started killing each other. And it's almost like somebody started a fight and then it led to like 5,000 deaths. So that just shows you kind of the erratic nature. The Didacts, once again, self-described, tend to be very magical. I mean, I know that these are seemingly like condescending ways to describe like jungle people, but tend to be very animistic, tend to be very magical, tend to rely upon shamans a lot. And so when there's ethnic conflict and there's no structure in place to tell these people not to, if the shaman sees, well, we need to go kill these people because one person was killed in our village, or there was a minor incident, well, then that's what happens. And of course there's the ethnic Chinese traders, which are all over Indonesia. I'm not even going to say that much about ethnic Chinese traders, but like most business that's like a shopfront business, that's like a day-to-day business, is not run by Indonesians. It's actually run by Chinese that kind of just bring in a whole garbage of stuff from China, or just wherever Chinese are business people, wherever they get their stuff, they start businesses in Indonesia, and Indonesians, for the most part, don't compete against them. Now, that being said, the one exception to that is the sort of food business. I'm glad I thought about this. Kind of a common thing throughout Indonesia is that people tend to be very located in their ethnic regions, except for sort of gypsy, I don't know what the right word to use is, of various ethnic groups that serve like food. Like there's one group from Sumatra that serves padanisi, I believe it's called, which is like the ethnic dish of Indonesia, or like kind of come to be accepted as that in the fact that Indonesia doesn't have a national dish because it's very decentralized. The national dish of Indonesia, there's another tribe from, I want to say it's the eastern island somewhere, the Southeast Islands, like Samba or something, that serve iced coconut, and now that is real. Oh man, do I love some iced coconut. Talk about the draw of the languid, paradisical life of living in the tropics. Warm weather, beaches, coconuts, and then you got the reality, which is that's a percentage, and then there's a lot of other problems. But anyway, yeah, so there's, I don't even know where I was going with this. There's a lot of different types of people that do that. Okay, Sumatra, it's really kind of split into two sections. There's the Aik section, which is AECH, which are sort of like the most hardcore Muslims in Indonesia, and actually try to separate from Indonesia in one of Indonesia's many sort of revolutionary campaigns or rebellions to create a Sharia law state. And she visits some political parties here. The separation happened at the same time, 1997, or late 90s, early 2000s, I think. Maybe early 2000s. Since then, there's still sort of like the Sharia law. but largely a lot of the rebels that were fighting to the death in Indonesia. You know, she mentions one section where a soldier is in a country where country and a religion, particularly where respect for the dead and a proper burial is of utmost importance. You know, soldiers would routinely like leave soldiers of the opposite stripe naked in the road with their penis cut off and stuffed into their mouths as sort of a way to send a message to whoever you're going to send it to. That's a very vivid image, and just crazy. She talks about sort of the stripping of the jungle and the traditional jungle lifestyle for palm farms in Sumatra. I don't know I have too much to say about that other than that, Sumatra and probably Borneo, well, really all over Indonesia, the timber industry is just, destroying the country. My hope would be that there might be some sort of middle path between jungle and sort of like these large strip plantations, maybe like in the future in an idealistic Indonesian state, which almost never exists, but you can hope that like for every tract of plantation, stripped land for rubber plantation or whatever it is, palm plantation, that there would be a certain amount of jungle set aside for preservation. But so far, the effort to do that is in place. I'm not going to say like it doesn't exist, but it has certainly not overcome the power of the timber industry. Is what it is. Let's see. And then she moved on to Java. Man, this is going to be running long. Java, the beast, the main, and one of the things she knows about Java is even in Java, where it's seemingly much more homogenistic, people have local loyalties. The kind of strata between rich and poor is much greater in Java just because there's much greater economy, whereas in some of these poor regions, people are poor, but they're almost universally poor outside of, like a very few kind of mining interests, which make up a tiny fractionary percentage, but the vast majority of the population is egalitarian just because they have to be. Whereas in Java, it's much more hierarchical. Java is much more agriculturally I don't even want to say sufficient, productive. They're much more agriculturally productive, partially because the combination of they get the right rains, which not everywhere in Indonesia gets. They get the right volcanic soil, which essentially means good soil, right type of rain climate. You can just grow crops continually and the soil won't deplete. It'll just grow and grow and grow and grow. So that creates, like a higher structure, which creates cities, which creates cappuccino places, which creates, McMansions, which creates slums, which creates, like red light districts, which creates litter. She mentioned one of the cities in Indonesia, Sambaza? Damn it. Whatever that city is, let's see. Surabaya is actually a surprise in Indonesia that Indonesia is massively littered, but this city is the first to sort of on a local, almost like a neighborhood criminal watch group, like a similar idea for trash, of collecting trash sort of on a neighborhood basis and having incentive for people to do this in small cash rewards. And it's actually the cleanest city in Indonesia. This compared to Jakarta, which is just a heaving mass of dysfunctionality that somehow does not self-implode on itself, somehow, miraculously. She talks about sort of some of the traditional kind of Muslim areas, Solo, and really kind of the biggest split is kind of between the traditional villages that use this agricultural land to great benefit and the massive cities that kind of exist. Let's see, what else? English Town, that was kind of cool. It's an entire city that the students, at least, not really the service workers, but all the students, they only speak English in this entire town. It's not that big a town. It's not like one of the cities. but it's kind of an anomaly when you're in the middle of Islamic, Indonesian speaking Indonesia. That there's this one town where they just speak English, and really it's kind of a cheap way for people to learn English without having to go to like an expensive private school. The public schools largely being inefficient at teaching English in that hello Mrs. or hello Mr. is taught via repetition, and that's mostly all students know is just sort of kind of like these repetitive 5 to 10 phrases or whatever. Yeah, I think that's it. This is a long review, but this is a good book. It really does give you an idea of what Indonesia is like. And what else I like about this is that Elizabeth, she doesn't kind of cover it from a overhead perspective. She really goes and stays at like guest houses, stays with the people, goes to festivals, takes local transportation, sees the day-to-day life of people within Indonesia, which I don't think you can really say about like a history book. And it's the main reason that I like this genre. I would rate this like maybe like Empire of the Indus was a really good example. Maybe like Country Driving. It's sort of like a great combination of, those are other books, of history, economics, culture, all taken from a perspective where the person really goes out and finds out rather than just kind of sitting in some ivory tower and figuring out about it. Anyway, this review is running long, so I gotta hit the bye-bye button. Indonesia Etc, The Improbable Nation by Elizabeth PIsani. There you go, you guys.